What's going on, guys? Welcome back to Resurrect. Today we are still working on the E92 M3. We are about 95% done, but what's left to do is the headlights. Now, my donor headlights came out of my flood vehicle, and after looking through these headlights, they're in pretty bad shape. Now, the case and the lens, all the plastic parts are fine. Nothing is broken. But if you take a minute to look inside these headlights, these are adaptive headlights, which means that this part moves around as you turn the steering wheel. It'll move left or right. So there's a lot of little motors and electronics in this headlight, and the flood vehicle was filled with water up to the headlights. At a bare minimum, that's where the water level was. So that means that all these little motors inside are just done. They are non-functional. So there's a lot of error codes that come up when you try to hook up these headlights because none of this electrical stuff is responding to the computer. So another problem we have is the wiring harness inside. It's a common problem with these headlights. Some of the earlier headlights had a lot of problems with the wires. The insulation gets very brittle. So as you can see here, you could see like it's just flaking right up. So all of those wires, that entire harness inside here needs to be replaced. So what we're going to do today is we are going to completely gut this headlight, and we're going to pull out all of the bad electrical parts, and we're going to install new electrical parts. Now, this works pretty well for my other headlight, which I've already finished. My other headlight was, I had a wrecked headlight that was smashed pretty bad, but all my electrics were good, and then I had my flooded headlight, so I've already rebuilt that one. And now the other headlight was missing on this car, so I had to buy a replacement headlamp. And the headlamp that I bought, it's a slightly broken one, because if I wanted a good quality headlamp, even used, we're talking $600 to $800 on eBay or from a salvage yard. And then if you want to buy it new, they're like about $1,200 or $1,300 from BMW. So I found myself a slightly damaged headlight, but the electrical parts are good in it, and I was just for a few $100s, a couple $100, I was able to find that one. So I'm going to just take the best of both parts, combine them into one headlight. So we're going to get right on into this and just start dismantling this thing, and we're going to just tear this thing down to a bare shell. Just all the parts are going to be thrown out. Now, you're going to need a lot of room when you do something like this, so have a nice big counter. You're going to want to stay very organized because the insides of these headlamps they're pretty, how do you say, they're intricate. So you want to make sure and set all the screws aside and don't misplace anything. Some of the tools that we're going to be using today, we need some type of source of heat to remove the butyl that's sealing this lens. Now you could use one of these. Way too much heat, guys. Don't use one of these. Also, there's a lot of guys online that use heat guns. This could work well, but you really got to regulate your heat, and you do run the risk of warping the plastic. So I personally prefer just a regular hair dryer. So I had to go through some of my wife's tools, her beauty tools and I found a couple things that will work well for this job, and that's her hair dryer. It's very difficult to warp the plastic with heat coming from this. Another tool I found in her tool supply that might help for this video is this brush. Now, this has nothing to do with this headlamp. This is more for the camera work, so my face won't be too shiny. You're going to need some plastic pry tools to get this off. As we heat this up, we're going to be prying. We don't want anything to break. If you use something metal, something too strong, this lens could crack. So that's the last thing you want. A lot of these parts are almost impossible to find. Now, you can get a replacement lens. You can get replacement ballasts and some of the plastic covers. As far as the wires and the internals, I don't believe BMW will sell you those parts. Those are all, this is sold as an assembly. So if we break anything in here, we are done. Because there's not a lot of replacement parts available. I'll have to probably buy another broken light. So hopefully that won't happen. If you hear a beep and the video ends suddenly, then you'll know what happened. All right, some of the other tools, you're going to need Torx, various size Torx bits. We're going to use a drill on some of them, and some of them we're just going to go by hand because we want to be really careful not to crack the housing by putting too much torque on any of the screws. So let's get started here. First thing we're going to do is this is how the headlamp comes out as an assembly. So we're going to remove this mounting piece here, just a couple of screws to do that. It's a T30 here. There's a couple screws to pull this plastic bracket off. Alright, there you have it. Now this is off. We can get this out of the way. Another thing too I didn't mention, when you reseal this lens, when you put this lens back on, it's going to be a good idea for you to have some replacement butyl tape. So we bought some here on Amazon. I'm going to have to work with this. It's a little bit thick. I think it's going to be too much, but we'll cut it down to size to replace this seal here. Another thing, another way you could do this, instead of using hair dryers, you could put this in your oven, maybe 150, 175. Some guys online were saying 200 degrees, and then just leave it in there for maybe 10 minutes, and then this should get soft, and then you can just pry it out. But I found that this works pretty well, and this is a sure thing. It's very safe, so we're going to do it this way because I don't want to mess anything up. So hair dryer is going to have to cut it here. Now before we do that though, I still got to get some other parts. This ballast, which is on here, this is actually not a ballast. This is actually the controller for the adaptive headlight system. So we got to remove this box. This is bad for sure. And in case you don't already know, if you ever need a ballast for any headlamp, whether it be BMW, any General Motors vehicles, or Chrysler, anything at all, you could take these part numbers that are on these ballasts and you can go online, plug them into eBay or Amazon, and you're going to find all kinds of cheaper alternatives. They're probably out of China, but they work, and I don't know how long they work for, but they work pretty well. And for like one of these, it costs like a tenth of what the BMW one would cost. So for that, I'll just keep throwing these away and popping in new ones. I say that now, but we'll see what happens. But and then as well as these controllers, this adaptive headlight controller, this is also offered by, they must come from China or somewhere, but they look a little bit different. They don't have the same markings, but the circuitry looks very similar. So we're going to test it out and see if that works. I mean, this was like $30, but from BMW it's like $220. So definitely worth a shot for 30 bucks. So let's pull this old one out, this bad one. Got a T20 right here to pull out this ballast. Alright, and as you can see, these terminals, they are super corroded. So this part is just done. So that's why we need to replace all these electrics. They're all just in bad shape. Even this connector here, there's white pasty stuff all over it, corrosion. All of this electrical stuff has to come out of this housing. We're just going to use this housing alone because it is a good housing. All right. Pull out this side marker light here. All right. So the next step here is we pull this little vent tube out, this little rubber vent tube. This is what helps remove or allow condensation to escape this this headlight assembly. And then behind it, there's a little screw. So this is the one screw in the housing that you'll need to remove before you start working the lens off. I'm using this because I've done this many times before, but with an impact, just be very careful. It's probably better just to go with hand tools, and I will once I get it inside here, but just be careful with that. It's very easy to break this plastic stuff, especially after 10 years. This stuff gets very brittle. So the next step, we've got this little plastic trim piece up top here. All right, now we're going to start working this lens. I'm going to set it on high. This is 2,000 watts. All right, just don't go bonkers with your hair dryer. Just get a normal hair dryer. I don't know if any of you guys out there have like you know, if you're like John Bon Jovi watching this video and your hairdryer is like the size of a leaf blower or something, don't use that one. Just use a normal hairdryer. Just gonna lift these tabs up a little bit. Every once in a while I'll check on it. Don't want to snap these tabs off. Just a safety tip, do not do this in the bathtub. Alright, the lens is completely loose. Now we're just going to start pulling it off gently. There's some wires in here. We don't care about the wires because we're going to replace them, but just know that in case you're trying to save the wires in your headlight that you might be working on. Alright, this thing is upside down right now, so I'm pulling it out, and the wires are located in the upper left corner here. And there's a little bit of slack, but there's right here, there's a brown and black wire. And we're just going to pop this thing out before we separate this lens completely. The first thing you're going to want to do is get the halo lights out of here. I know that some of the newer ones, the assemblies might be a little bit different. This is an early E92 M3 2008 headlamp, so I don't know if all the lights are the same. They might be all the way to 2013, I'm not sure. Alright, just that one screw down low, and then this halo will pop off, and it's just connected by a plastic clip. So there's half of the halo right here. Alright, there's just a few wires you'll have to disconnect. A white wire, it just slides right out. Got a brown ground wire. One screw takes that one out. There we go. And there's a couple more connections in the back. Alright, so now this assembly is out, and this is the adaptive headlight part that kind of swirls around and turns with the vehicle as you're turning. The halogen bulb goes right in here, and the ballast is what powers this. This is the sort of the light bar that goes to the halos. So we're going to pull the rest of this light bar out of the housing. Alright, one screw and that slides right out. I'm going to set that over here. Trying to keep everything in order because I've already done this one time, and if you get this out of order, you're going to spend a lot of time assembling and then disassembling and then reassembling. So keep everything grouped and organized in the way it goes back in. Okay, so now we're going to start working this harness out. This harness is ruined. But before we do that, I'm going to start disassembling the other headlight. I'm going to get it to this point so I can kind of see how the harness goes in and just get everything in the right spot, because there's a lot of clamps and clips and connections here. I just want everything to go exactly where it's supposed to go. So I'm not going to do that last step just yet. I'm going to set this aside. Alright, so the first thing I'm going to do is I'm going to verify this part number. Now, I did verify this part number before I purchased it, but I'm going to do it again. You never know, sometimes a seller could sell you something different. You know, with BMW parts and other car manufacturers, there are really so many different revisions. One little part number off, and you could have potentially a completely different light, but my part numbers match identically, so I think we are good. Now, the problem with this headlamp, and the reason why I got it discounted, is because all of the brackets, or all of the, you know, the retainers that hold this to the vehicle, they are all broken off, every single one of them. However, it looks like this headlight has a little bit of a problem. The lamp is just off to the side. I'm not sure if it's broken or what's going on. I do need these parts though. I may be able to use some of these parts and combine the two. And normally I'd probably return this light, but for the sake of time, I'm going to try to salvage this light and see if I can combine the two. So taking a little bit of a gamble here, but I need to get this car done ASAP, so I don't have a lot of time. It took like a week for me to get this light in. So I'm going to start pulling this thing apart and see if I can salvage the parts. Now I'm going to check the wiring harness to make sure it's not in bad shape like my wiring harness, and it's not. It looks perfect. Alright, so I've looked this light over. It's not in the best shape, but I'm going to go ahead and start harvesting all the parts I need out of this light, and I'm going to try to clean up this wiring harness. Most of the wires are good. There's a few broken and frayed wires, so I'm going to need to do some repairs to it, but I really can't afford to take a few more weeks to wait for another headlight assembly, and then there's a good possibility it could also have problems. So hopefully the motors are good. That's the main thing that I'm concerned with, because I do have a lot of the non-moving mounting parts available here. So I'm going to start disassembling this thing. Alright, now we're going to get started on the wiring harness. Now this one will, not only will we have to remove it, but we're also going to have to do some repairs. My other wiring harness is totally shot, so it would just be way too extensive. Here I'm just going to have to remove some wires from the harnesses and just add some heat shrink tubing. Alright, we're going to remove this plastic headlamp harness, the main harness here. Just going to take a little thin screwdriver and just kind of wedge it in here. There's a open slot, it's kind of hard to tell, but we're just wedge it in here and this thing will slide right out. On both sides, top and bottom, just kind of pry out gently and then it slides right out of the housing. Same goes for this down here. We're gonna just, this one you just push on the clips and it'll pop right out. There we go. Try not to break any of this stuff because it is difficult to find replacement parts for, or impossible I should say. I'm gonna pop this little cover up just a little bit so we can get these two wires out. And these wires go to the ballast for halogen light, or the low beams. Now I'm just going to remove this little white ring here for the connectors for the side marker light. Alright, now I've got the main wiring harness out, and then I'm just going to remove this other connector for the between the halogen bulb and the ballast. Alright, and there we go. Everything's out. Now we're just left with the empty harness, or the empty shell, or the main housing of the light. That's all that's left. We're probably just going to trash this, but I'm not going to trash anything yet until we're completely done and we know that we don't need any other parts. I'm just going to set this aside. Now we just got to tidy up this wiring harness on this used light. If you ever find yourself needing to buy headlights for a car, try to stick to one that you know what kind of year range it came out of. The newer the better. This one looks like it came out of an '08, and some of the earlier M3s had problems with these wires getting brittle, just drying up. It could be faulty insulation, it could be a wrong wire size. I think it's probably just the insulation. So we're going to tidy this up and get this thing into the headlight that we're kind of rebuilding here. Alright guys, so there you have it. We've got this wiring loom fixed as well as we can. All the areas where the wire was rotting away, we have heat shrink tubing over it. And then for the rest of the wire that's in pretty good condition, we've just wrapped it in this cloth wiring loom tape. And hopefully that will allow this repair and this wiring loom and this fix just to last longer. That's what I'm hoping. So we're going to get this thing all put back together, and hopefully once we get this thing connected, we have no warning lights, and the light works, and all of this labor was worth it, because this is probably going to take somebody in the ballpark of 2 or 3 hours to do, or a little more, if you run into a wiring loom issue like this. So we're probably going to have about 4 or 5 hours actually invested in this particular repair. So is it worth it? I don't know, maybe, maybe not, but you know, it's definitely worth trying and showing you guys what's involved in disassembling this light and putting it back together. So now we're going to start reassembling this light. Let's get to it. Alright, so I just tested the headlights last night. Everything seems to be working as far as both lamps are lighting up, and when I turn on my flashers, this light does move. So everything seems to be working okay. The only thing I'm not 100% sure that works is the adaptive headlights. I'm going to have to get this car out on the road and test that out. Now, on one of these controllers on the bottom here, I did see some corrosion, so I went ahead and ordered a new one. And I do have a warning light on the dash, so I'm not 100% sure what's causing that. I think it could be that corroded controller, or it could be like some sort of coating issue. However, the headlights do work, so I'm going to go ahead and throw these things back together, and I'm going to worry about the adaptive headlight errors later, because bottom line, the headlights work. Adaptive, you know, whether that's, if I can't get that to work, it's not the end of the world. It's not worth me spending $3,000 and getting all new headlamps for this thing. So we have working headlights, so we're going to see what will happen from here on out. So I'm going to go ahead and glue these lenses down, and then I'm going to polish these out so they look brand new again. Okay, so now that I've got the headlights all back together and they're all sealed up, now I'm going to start resurfacing the lens. So I'm going to start with an air sander here. It's a 3-inch air sander, and I'm using a foam interface backing. And I'm going to start with 220 grit, and I'm going to keep doubling it, and I'm going to work my way up till I get to like 3,000. And then I'm going to give it a nice polish, and these headlights are going to be good as new. So let's get started on that. Alright, so when you're sanding these, sometimes there's like a clear coating on these. I don't know if that's from the factory, or sometimes when these cars end up at dealers, you'll see guys out there spraying these with clear coat. So if you see that situation, you want to kind of keep sanding that down, and you're going to see like little ghost lines, but you want to keep sanding until all of those ghost line goes away, and you have a nice flat finish. And once you have that nice flat finish with your most aggressive paper, then you can move on to the next grit. So we're going to keep working. Our line has moved down about halfway. We're going to keep sanding this layer off because it's kind of peeling up in some areas. And if we polish it, you're still going to be able to see those little lines. So we just got to get rid of all of that layer. Just in case you're wondering what I'm using here, just regular soap and water. I'm using some dish soap here, just a light amount on the headlight just to provide kind of a lubrication, keep it cool, and it sands just a little bit better. So that's all I'm using here. And this layer is almost gone, so it's taken probably take 3 or 4 times with the 180 grit if you have a heavy amount of clear coat on top of the headlight. So keep working on this until it's all gone. Alright guys, so it's time for polishing now. We've already sanded up to 3,000. I'll tell you all the intervals, but I did a little bit 80, but it was a little bit too aggressive, and I ended up having to use 180 for quite a while. So 180 is probably good to start if it's got some flaking on the clear coat. Then we went to, let's see, after that was 320. Then we went to 600 to 1,000. We went to 1,500, and then we went to 2,000, and then we went to 3,000. And now we're just going to do 2 stages of polishing, and these headlights should be as good as new. So we're using a 3-inch polisher now with a 3-inch wool bonnet on here, and we're going to be using Meguiars 105 as our first step. So let's get started polishing. Alright, now we're just going to a foam bonnet, and we're using the 205 as a final step. Alright guys, I am a complete mess. I'm covered in dust and polish from this whole process, but these headlights are done. And they look really good. It's hard to tell on camera, but they are crystal clear. They practically look brand new, or they at least look like what you would expect to see on a 2011 BMW M3. So what we've done so far is we've completely gutted both of these headlights, We removed all the bad electrical parts and all the rotted wiring, or the wiring that had the insulation that was falling apart. And then we've put new wiring harnesses in. One of them was perfect, the other one needed some repairs. So we did that. We put all the new electrics in. We've tested everything out. Everything works okay. The only thing that's in question is the adaptive headlight system. So my headlights do go up and down for the brights, but as far as that movement from side to side, I'm not 100% sure if that works, but I'm okay with it not working if I can't get it to work. I have a suspicion that maybe one of the controllers is bad. On the used headlight there was some corrosion on there, so we're going to mess around with that. But if I can't get the adaptive headlights to work, it's not a big deal for me. At least we have headlights that are functioning. And then we've polished up and we've sanded and polished up these lenses and made them look as good as possible. So that's a wrap here, guys. So if you'd like to see the video where we put these back on the car and we drive the M3 and debut it, stay tuned for that, and check out our other videos of the rebuild process of the BMW M3 that we're working on. And so if you like any of these videos, please guys, please hit that like and subscribe. I really appreciate it. It helps us a lot just by taking 1 second to click on something. It really helps us a lot. So we're going to put out some more content on little tips and tricks to help you guys save money on rebuilds. And thank you for watching, and we'll see you next time.